Well, hey, how's it going, Paul? Good to
Hi,
chat.
Glenn. You've got so many films behind you.
I know this is my office, and you've got to create an environment which you're comfortable in and love, and so I sort of
Wow.
yeah,
You're still buying DVDs.
uh, DVDs, Blu-rays, 4K, yeah, all of the formats.
Yeah, I still buy DVDs and Blu-rays myself.
Yeah, no, it's a
Everyone tells
passion.
me I'm an idiot.
No, it's the best way to consume movies, I reckon. Before I jump into Kids No, I just want to say congratulations on Ego because I think that's the best film of last year. I've watched it 4 or 5 times now. I love it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I it was a passion project, that one. That was, you may know, Michael was a good friend of mine, and
Yeah.
so making that film was difficult because obviously there's a lot of compromises involved when someone has died, and not only for myself, who was still grieving, but for many people who volunteered to sit in front of the camera. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
Remarkable film. I loved it. With Kids No, I'm sure there's not a lot of people that would be aware that John Brumpton wrote this movie. And if my little bit of research was accurate, it's been what 3 decades since he's written a film. Do you know how long this story's been sitting with him?
Well, so most people would know John as an esteemed actor.
Hmm.
And indeed, he is a screenwriter. Uh, John also spent some time in his life traveling with a tent boxing troupe.
Right.
So his original script was written from personal experiences, and then, of course, John's wild, crazy imagination took over. I came to the project after it had been one of the producers had optioned John's original screenplay, and they'd begun doing some work on it. I mean, I think that the story is that John's screenplay was running to 180 pages and was just needed some careful editing.
Hmm.
But along the way, that things had developed, and then um, well into that process, they invited me to come on board, and that's my cat you can hear. Um, and I came on board with some pretty some fairly straightforward ideas about where I wanted to take it.
Hmm.
I mean, that was certainly the invitation. Do you want to come on board and direct this, and do you want to be involved in the development? What would you do with it? But yes, John's a screenwriter, and there's no doubt that that was the attraction to me, was it was authentic. I loved the epic nature of the the storytelling. I loved the fact that there was going to be so many characters to juggle. It's not something that I had done in the past.
Hmm.
I thought that was going to be a real challenge. I love the characters. I love the relationships. I love the landscape. I was aware of tent boxing. I had some awareness about tent boxing and the wonderful mythology surrounding it. And, I think it's a very, very, very colourful, wonderful part of Australian folklore, obviously celebrated in songs by Paul Kelly and Archie Roach and others, and I'd heard those. Um, so there was all these reasons to come on board, and I also just knew where I wanted to take it, and it was very, very exciting to know always that John it had come from his own personal experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. Did he share with you, little bits of the story that were actual personal accounts? And because I know obviously it's a very much a fictionalized story, but were there any moments in there that he goes, that really happened?
Yeah, John and I would talk,
Mm.
and I would, um, and he'd talk about his experiences. I mean, one of the other great things about working on it was that once we started production, we also um, accidentally met Michael Caratiana.
Hmm.
So Michael is on screen in the film. He plays there's a guy with a top knot that
Yep.
is wearing
Yep.
a
Yep.
poncho. So that's Michael. And Michael is related to Roy Bell. And so besides Jimmy Sharman's boxing troupe tent, the next most famous tent is probably Roy Bell's tent.
Hmm.
Michael Caratiana was related to Roy Bell by marriage. And I found out that just outside Dubbo, in a place called Tullamore, Michael had Roy Bell's 100-year-old tent wrapped up.
Wow.
And we had always worried about reproducing that tent. I mean, we'd seen the rich archive of photos of boxing tents, and I'd read the memoirs, and I'd talked to people who'd been there, and I even had family members who back in the day had kind of gone to see boxing tents at various agricultural shows, and they were always down the back of Show Alley because everyone thought that it was a crazy place to be. So I flew to Dubbo and drove out to Michael's place, and he'd pulled Roy Bell's tent out of mothballs. It was 100 years old, and he'd put it up for me. And it was like stepping back in time. It was, we're talking about a boxing tent that had traveled all around Australia, that was soaked in beer, blood, and dust.
Oh my God.
And
Was it in good condition? Like, obviously good enough for you to use in the film, but like,
no, it was incredible condition. What you
Wow.
see is Michael's tent, and the only difference is that obviously the front canvas we had to reproduce.
Yep.
The production designer on this film has done the most extraordinary job. I think
I was going to bring him up. He did a great job.
I think it's one of the most beautiful pieces of production design in a recent Australian film I've seen.
I agree completely. I wanted to just mention, in relation to that, what I loved about the film and appealed to me the most was there's a timeless look about this, because although it's set in the 70s, it might as well be the 30s or 40s. Like, it really has that sort of ageless sort of thing, and it's all down to the production design. So what were your directives for Clayton?
So I stepping into making the film, I was worried about it being hijacked by the production design. And I've seen quite a few Australian films, which I won't name, but I could. But I feel like have been hijacked by the production design because they're period films, and everyone's become so seduced by the look. And sometimes that's problematic because in the meantime, everything looks like it's squeaky new. I wanted Kid Snow to look like it was soaked in the same dust and beer, blood and sweat that I knew Michael's tent was when I first saw it.
Yeah.
And Clayton Jauncey, who was a production designer, had come on quite early in development. I'd gone over to WA just to travel around locations to get some inspiration, to immerse myself in the landscape and to catch up with some old Indigenous tent boxes in Kalgoorlie. But Clayton and I just kept going, let's make this film look as dusty. Let's even when it comes to the makeup and the makeup and the hair, we wanted it to be as dusty and bedraggled as we could. We didn't want any star turns here.
Yeah.
We wanted you to taste the dust and the heat and the way it engulfs those landscapes and those lives.
I guess the environment's done a lot of the heavy lifting for you, like, because it really does play a character in the film.
Well, especially because it's about two Irish brothers who are fish out of water. I mean, they're shipwrecked. I mean, they come from Ireland. They're lily white Irish boys who have found themselves stranded in outback Australia. I mean, I think that's why the scenes with the Indigenous characters are so received so warmly, because they seem so at home in that landscape. It's their lives. It's that landscape for those Irish guys is very, very haunting. I mean, and even for the actors. I mean, Tom Bateman and Billy Howell arrived in Australia, and pretty soon we were in Kalgoorlie, and I think they were going, "Where the fuck am I?" and how do I get out of here. And then I suggested they watch a few Australian films like Sunday Too Far Away and Wait Right, and I think they went, how do I get out of here, and when can that happen?
That's right.
So, but the landscape is very important, and I also wanted to make an Australian film that I thought was epic. There was a feeling for me that we just weren't making films like this anymore.
Sure, yeah.
And I wanted to make a film that had that epic feel. So the production design was important. I mean, I think Gary Phillips' cinematography is just so beautiful and simple. It's a film that lives and breathes in a very different way on the big screen as well.
Yep, I completely agree. One addition to the cast, which I always love seeing, and you're no stranger to working with him, is Nathan Phillips. I do love working with him. And just on a side note, I spoke to him a little while ago and asked him what his favorite film of his own catalog is, and he instantly went with Australian Rules. Like that is to him his best film. So that's a
Yeah, I mean,
testament.
well, I met Nathan, and as you know, that's a very, very young Nathan Phillips. I think it's probably his first feature
It
film.
was, yeah.
Um, Nathan's such a mercurial, wonderful, crazy character, and he was from the very, very start. I mean, I'm very fond of that film because of Nathan and because of Tom Budge
Hmm.
and because of Lisa Flanagan. Um, that was a tough film to make. I mean, I've always loved films set in the world of sports. I think it's a wonderful microcosm, and especially in Australia, it's a wonderful way to capture, discuss some of the issues that perplex and kind of haunt us as a country.
Yeah, and
Whether
we
it's,
and Australians have a relationship with sports, so it makes sense.
yeah, I think Australians are obsessed with sport.
Yeah.
It's an arena where we feel comfortable talking about things that we're not so comfortable talking about otherwise. And I think it is a wonderful microcosm into Australian society. But yeah, Nathan's a great character, and to have him in front of the camera again was very, very, very satisfying after all those years.
Yeah, he's great in it too. Another performance I really loved in this was just young Jake Latore. I thought he was fantastic, and particularly in the second half of the film, he really sort of came into his own and shone. Um, did you have to audition a lot of kids? And what was it about him that sort of got him the role?
Well, Glenn, I think you would understand that when it comes to casting kids, that's a nightmare because um, you're dealing with, so for every 500 kids that you audition, maybe half a dozen of them are worth bringing back. Many of them, you can see the potential, but I don't want to be conducting acting school when I'm working with kids. I can't, and I've had a lot of kids in my films. Australian Rules has a lot of kids.
Hmm.
Um, um, so, Harrison Gilbertson is in Australian
Hmm.
Rules, who goes on to have a wonderful career in America at the moment. Um, and Harrison was kind of 9 or 10. So we searched around for a lot of, we'd seen a lot of kids, and Anusha Zarkesh, who's my casting agent, who's done all my films, knows how important. I mean, I hang my hat on performances and casting,
Hmm.
whether it's Mia Wasikowska in Australia in Suburban Mayhem, or Emily Barclay, or Nathan Phillips, or so I was despairing. I'd seen a lot of actors um, who I just didn't. I thought they were just too old.
Yep.
I was cast. I saw actors who were like 11, 12, who physically looked like they'd get away with it, but they were just too knowing.
Yeah.
And then at the very last moment, Anusha said, "You should meet this kid, Jack Latour, and his sister is also an actress.
Hmm.
Has just done Runt."
Right. Yes, of course.
So I got on a Zoom. I was in Fremantle, and I spoke to Jack and his parents in Queensland. And within 10 minutes, his parents kind of took the back seat, and Jack kind of jumped up and started asking me questions. I just thought this kid's a natural.
Yeah.
And it is the most wonderful, wonderful moment when you find a young actor like that and I think Jack had an extraordinary experience. I think arriving in Kalgoorlie with
Hmm.
that cast of characters, it's a huge cast of characters, and I think Jack holds his own.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think he brings a lovely lightness to the film at times, a film that can become very dark. And I
Yeah.
thought, the relationship between his mum, between Phoebe Tonkin and he was wonderful. Uh, So yeah, I'm very, very lucky to find Jack.
Yeah, I loved his little arc that he had, because on one hand, in the first half of the film, he goes from being in some very adult situations and having to really be the man of the family, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, and then you got him beachside where he gets to be a kid again, and I think that's a really really good sort of juxtaposition, and he does it so well. I loved it.
Yeah, I think he's extraordinary, and they're two extraordinary kids, Jack and his sister, and supported by wonderful parents as well. So
Yeah.
when you're casting kids, that's who you're casting as well. You're casting the
Of
parents.
course, of course. You mentioned a few moments ago that you love sports movies, and I'm wondering, were there any movies of the past that you sort of you look to or lean to for a little bit of inspiration or technical sort of? And you've probably, I guess, you've never made a boxing film, so just how to get the boxing, how to shoot it. Did you look to any other films that really informed how you shoot that stuff?
Yeah, I've been a big fan of boxing films. None more so being the obvious one, which is Raging Bull, which is
Yeah.
also two brothers and a woman who comes between them, coincidentally.
Yes.
And I'd also been a big fan for very different reasons of a film that John Huston made called Fat City.
Right. Yep. Yep. No, that one.
Very young Stacey Keach, and well, a middle-aged Stacey Keach, but a very young. Who's the other one guy? I can't remember. I love that film, and that was certainly a reference for us in terms of the cinematography. I mean, that film was made, I think, in the 70s. It looks like it was made yesterday.
Yep.
It's an anomaly, that film. And I was also aware of all those, the Rocky films, which I'm a fan of the first couple. I was also had watched a lot of noir boxing films from the 40s and 50s, which of course Scorsese had referenced heavily.
Yep.
So there's a rich history of boxing films. I mean, I wasn't keen to make a boxing film. I was for all of the richness that John Brumpton had brought in terms of both tent boxing and professional boxing and those worlds. I was in the first instance struck by the relationships in the film and by the fact that there's two Irish brothers who have this very, very complicated, very, very dysfunctional relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's haunted by the past and by a bully father. And I love those stories about the damage men do to each other.
Yep. Yep.
And then the damage that they visit upon children and women in their lives. So I love boxing films, and certainly, but I'm a cinephile, so I watch a lot of films. So and so was Clayton, and so was Gary Phillips, the DP. So as strange as it may seem, one of my favourite references for this film was Paper Moon.
Oh yeah.
By Peter Bogdanovich.
Mm-hmm.
And you may not recall, but there's actually a scene where they go to a carnival and the character disappears into a leg tent to watch women stripping. I mean, I love that film because I think it's the relationship between those two characters is extraordinary. And,
yeah.
But that strangely was a reference for us. I mean,
Very cool.
I tend to throw a lot of films up, and I kind of do that in the hope that we won't land on one or become beholden to one. I kind of think that there was a lot of references, and I also collect photo books. So there's a book by a very, very famous photographer, Susan Maiselis, called Carnival Strippers, which was a very, very important reference for us.
Yep. I just love that you're happy to discuss those references, because so often I ask that question and people are reluctant to sort of reveal that, oh, I borrowed from here or I took some inspiration from there. To me, like it brings sort of integrity and honesty to the film, and there's clearly a lot of experience and a lot of passion put into this one, and I think it's fantastic. But I'm out of time, so I'm gonna leave it there. But thanks so much for having a chat. Like, this is a great movie, and I hope everybody goes out and checks it out.
Thanks, Glenn. I appreciate talking to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the star of the show. 10 years unbeaten.
My brother.
Snap!
I need somewhere decent to sleep for me and my boy.
Ever danced before? Got some great news. Kid's got a fight against Hammer Marino.
I've not fought a pro in years.
There's always more than one way to win a fight.
Or he messes me up so bad I never fight again.
Imagine how that would feel.
How's that, Sonny? Dances like a wolf. Shows packed every night. I hear she's pretty good at skipping too, eh?
He hasn't got it in him anymore. If I have to call it off, I will burn your tents to the ground right in front of you.
You're screwing it all up. You have to get your head in the game. You keep away from my brother.
Is that what you want? I gave everything up for you because you're family.
You can't leave, man. There's always more than one way to win a fight.